There is a silent force that is sabotaging your life, and you don't even notice it. It corrodes your achievements, pushes opportunities away, and distorts the way you see yourself. And the scariest part is that it acts inside you before it acts outside. If you feel that your prosperity slips through your fingers, that something always pulls you back, there is a reason. And today, I'm going to show you what it is. But be prepared. After this video, you will never look at your thoughts, your reactions, and your relationships the same way. Let's begin. The truth is simple, and, at the same time, brutal. Everything you experience, everything you attract, everything you lose or achieve, is first born within you. It is not the external world that defines your reality. It is the identity you silently hold in the deepest layers of your mind. The thesis is this: no technique, no protection, no ritual works while your internal identity is aligned with scarcity, with comparison, and with the unintegrated shadow. Everything you fear, everything you try to avoid, everything you believe you need to defend against, is exactly what you continue to create without realizing it. True prosperity does not come from effort. It comes from internal coherence. Envy, both the envy you feel and the envy you receive, is only a symptom of a psychological blind spot that has not yet been illuminated. And as long as your identity remains trapped in the idea of lack, you will continue vibrating in the same field where envy feeds, grows, and finds space to act. That is why, before we talk about protection, external energy, or the people around you, we need to reveal the truth that almost no one wants to see. The only force capable of blocking or releasing your prosperity is your own shadow. And it is by facing this shadow that everything begins to change. At this point, transformation starts. The truth is that each person carries within themselves a set of invisible forces that silently shape the way they act, react, and relate to their own life. These internal contents do not disappear just because they are ignored. On the contrary, the more hidden they are, the stronger they become. And it is precisely in this dark zone of the mind, where we store what we do not want to see, that the patterns that sabotage prosperity, self-esteem, and even the most important relationships emerge. These internal shadows do not appear out of nowhere. They are formed from small pains, poorly processed experiences, inherited beliefs, and repressed emotions that the person decided to sweep under the psychological rug. And each time this happens, a fragment of energy becomes trapped there, waiting for the moment to manifest in a distorted way. When this unconscious material begins to move, it does not appear as a clear memory. It appears as behavior, silent comparisons, unexplained discomforts, quick judgments, subtle anger, old resentments, feelings of inadequacy. All of these are signs that there is an internal content asking to be seen, and it is precisely here that the theme of the video begins to take shape, because one of the most common and dangerous effects of these shadows is the way they distort perception. What could be inspiration turns into a threat. The success of others becomes proof of your own insufficiency. Other people's achievements trigger old wounds that were never healed, and without realizing it, the person begins to vibrate in an emotional state capable of corroding their own prosperity. The shadow works this way. It acts before consciousness. It makes the person feel before understanding. And until it is illuminated, it silently determines what you believe you deserve, what you think you are capable of achieving, and, most importantly, how you react to the brilliance of others. That is why it is so important to understand this mechanism, not to point fingers, but to perceive how much of your current reality is the result of a layer of the mind that you may never have consciously accessed. True transformation begins when you recognize this internal territory, not with fear, but with honesty, because it is in this recognition that the process of liberation truly begins. Most people believe they understand what is happening within them, but they don't. They carry distorted concepts, ready-made labels, and phrases they repeat like mantras. And all of this creates a mental fog that prevents any real progress. Before moving forward, it is necessary to clear this fog. It is necessary to look at what you thought you knew and demystify it. The first truth is simple, but no one likes to face it. What you feel in response to another person's success reveals much more about you than about them. It is not just a passing discomfort or an innocent comment. It is a sign. A sign that something inside you is asking to be seen, understood, and re-signified. Another common distortion is believing that envy comes only from outside, as if it were an arrow shot by someone far away. But that is not how it works. The human emotional field does not operate by physical distance. It operates by resonance. The energy that affects you is the energy that finds space within you. If there were no space, it would not enter. If there were no internal gap, the arrow would not reach you. And perhaps the greatest myth of all is imagining that envy is simply desiring what someone else has. It is not. Human desire itself, is creative. It is a vital impulse. True envy is when another person's success triggers your wound, and the wound reacts with pain, criticism, irony, or judgment. It is when someone else's achievement exposes the gap you have not yet filled. Demystifying is this: removing the makeup from emotions, looking at what is really happening without denying, softening, or running away. Because as long as you believe in the distorted versions you created, you will not be able to access the power behind this shadow. And yes, there is power, but it only reveals itself when the mask falls. This is the point where the journey truly begins, when you accept seeing what was hidden and realize that nothing there was as frightening as it seemed. The shadow loses strength when it is seen. The lie loses strength when it is named. Confusion loses strength when truth enters. Now that the fog is lifting, we can go deeper. When you start observing your own story honestly, you realize that the shadow never appears explicitly. It hides, it disguises itself, it presents itself as opinion, as innocent criticism, as logical justification. But deep down, it is only the wounded voice inside you trying not to be seen. And this is the point where most people get stuck. They believe they already understand their shadows when in fact, they have only identified the surface. The true shadow lives in what you avoid thinking. In that instant reaction, you try to correct before anyone notices. In the silent discomfort that arises when someone achieves something you have not yet reached. The shadow reveals itself in the micro-expression you suppress, in the quick thought you pretend not to have had, in the sensation of contraction in your chest, that appears and disappears in seconds but leaves a trace. This is the hardest part. Admitting that the emotion you believe to be normal, logical, justified is, in fact, an escape. And the more you try to hide it from yourself, the more it governs your choices without you noticing. Because the shadow does not act only in emotion, it acts in posture, in behavior, in how you compare yourself, in how you react to others' victories, in the energy you put when speaking about someone, in the subtle internal rooting for the other, not to advance so much. And all of this happens far faster than your conscious reasoning. The body perceives before you do. The energy drops before you notice. The mind tries to justify afterward. That is why so many people spend their lives believing the problem is outside, while the root is inside. It is not the other who bothers you. It is the part of you that refuses to admit it still carries unhealed scars. And the more you try to ignore this scar, the more it reacts to someone else's shine. Another person's success becomes a mirror, and the mirror shows exactly what you have not yet allowed yourself to expand. Not for incapacity, but due to conditioning, old loyalties, and internal stories you still repeat unconsciously. When you understand this, everything changes. Envy stops being an ugly feeling and becomes a signal, a marker, a map. It shows exactly where there is blocked potential, where there is repressed strength, where a version of you is waiting to emerge. But to read this map, you need courage. Courage to recognize that the first battle is not with the world. It is with your own internal resistance, with the fear of shining, with the habit of diminishing yourself, with the reflex of comparing, with the voice that says you cannot. It is here, in this dive, that you begin to see that your own envy, or the envy of others, is nothing more than a warning that a part of you is asking to evolve. And if you can look at it honestly, without judgment, something extraordinary happens. The shadow stops dominating and begins revealing the treasure it always protected. Because every shadow hides a potential, Every wound holds dormant power. Every discomfort carries a call for expansion. This is the point where the internal work truly begins, and it is the point where most people run away. But you are not here by accident. If you've reached this point, it is because you are already prepared to see deeper than the average person can. And now, the depth will increase. There is a point that almost no one notices. What bothers you in another does not speak about them. It speaks about you. Envy, judgment, hidden criticism. All of this is only a reflection of what already exists within your own field. It is uncomfortable to admit, but liberating when finally understood. Life places people and situations in front of us not to provoke, but to reveal what is still hidden. When you feel an inexplicable tightness at someone else's achievement, when something in you contracts for no apparent reason, this reaction is not an external attack, it is an internal message. It is your unconscious trying to communicate with you. And this is the crucial point. Projection. The mind projects what it does not want to see. The shadow you do not accept in yourself appears in others as an amplified mirror. You do not see the person. You see the part of you that has not yet been embraced. And the greater the resistance, the brighter the mirror shines. That is why envy hurts. Not because the other person achieved something, but because it touches the wound you have hidden. Their victory lights up the place where you stored an old desire, a forgotten fear, a limiting belief. The shadow reacts, and you mistake this reaction for an external problem. When you understand this, everything changes. Envy ceases to be an attack and becomes an invitation to investigate what you have been avoiding feeling, an invitation to recognize the part of you that still asks for healing, an invitation to stop running away. And the truth is simple. No one projects what is already resolved. Genuine joy for someone else's prosperity only arises in those who have already aligned with their own inner strength. Those who live in true abundance do not need to bring anyone down because they do not see others as threats, but as confirmation. Looking in the mirror hurts at first, but it is precisely there that the key lies. Every projection you identify is an open door to your next level. When you embrace this shadow, the energy that once drained you transforms into power. What once bothered you becomes what propels you forward. And that is what separates those who remain stuck in the same cycles from those who truly grow. The courage to acknowledge that the enemy was never outside, it was always within. And by defeating this internal enemy, the distorted mirror, you finally begin to walk toward your true prosperity. And this is exactly where everything turns, because there comes a moment when the person realizes they are not fighting something external, they are fighting themselves. It is when they finally notice that it is not the other's envy that weakens them, but their own internal vibration that opens the door for this energy to enter. And this realization hurts. It hurts because it is too simple, too direct, unavoidable. The turnaround happens when the mask falls. It is not the gaze of others that blocks your prosperity. It is the silent fear of not being enough. And this is where the conflict explodes, because the mind wants to protect the old self, the old narrative, the old defense mechanism. It says the problem is out there, but the body knows, the consciousness knows, life knows, and a real internal clash begins between the self that wants to rise and the self accustomed to living small. At this point, the person feels divided, one part trying to move forward, another pulling back. It is the shadow resisting the light. It is scarcity trying to survive. And this is the decisive moment, the instant when many give up, many run, many sabotage themselves, because admitting that the obstacle has always been inside is the most liberating and at the same time, most uncomfortable truth there is. But for those who remain, who sustain this internal impact without fleeing, something new is born, a kind of clarity that cuts like a blade. If the shadow was created inside, it can only be dissolved inside, and it is here, precisely here, that the path begins to change. Because the conflict ceases to be an enemy and becomes the gateway to expansion. When we speak of the shadow, we are not speaking of something abstract, theoretical, or mystical. We are speaking of internal forces that constantly act, shaping decisions, sabotaging paths, and influencing everything you manifest in the world. And envy does not arise out of nowhere. It is merely the door that reveals a much larger corridor within your psyche. The true root of envy is unrecognized pain. It is that internal point where you have not yet felt enough, where you still believe there is something wrong with you. This is the nervous center of the shadow, a place where old wounds remain alive, silent, asking to be seen. And when life places someone next to you, prospering, achieving, advancing, what was hidden in you begins to pulse. Not because the other is shining too brightly, but because you are too dim in the wrong place. Envy is merely the reflection of this disconnection. The great mistake people make is thinking envy is about the other. It is not. It never was. It is about you, about the distance between who you are and who you know deep down you could be. And the greater this distance, the more intense this dense energy called envy becomes. But there is a detail almost no one notices. Envy is a guide, a map. It points exactly to where you have not yet allowed yourself to grow, where you are repressing your shine, where you are refusing your own power. The shadow does not want to destroy you. It wants to complete you. But as long as you look at it with fear, shame, or rejection, it will continue finding ways to appear distorted, as anger, competition, comparison, resentment. When you have the courage to enter this internal territory, something changes. The same energy that once drained you begins to propel you. What was weight becomes fuel. The part of you that envied now admires, learns, models, expands. This is real alchemy, transforming a destructive impulse into creative force. And here lies the central point of this expansion. No one feels envy for what they do not deeply desire. Envy reveals your most intimate calling. If you feel discomfort at someone else's success, instead of feeling ashamed or denying it, ask, what is this achievement trying to show me about myself? Because you do not feel envy for what is not aligned with your purpose. You feel envy for what was born for you to live, but you are not yet allowing yourself. This is the invitation the shadow gives you, to awaken. From the moment you accept this, the energy that once held you back begins to clear a path, because you finally stopped fighting the shadow and started using it to grow. This is where identity transforms. This is where consciousness changes frequency. This is where prosperity stops being a distant possibility and becomes a natural consequence. The shadow is deep, yes, but it is your lever, and the deeper you dive into it, the higher you can rise. Transformation begins the moment you decide to stop dialoguing with your old identity. It is not an intellectual process. It is an internal repositioning, the silent exchange of a tired self for a self that finally assumes its place in the world. Reprogramming is not memorizing affirmations or repeating beautiful phrases. It is confronting the exact point where you lost yourself. That childhood decision, that old wound, that moment when you concluded, without words, that you were not enough. It is there that change begins. The old identity will always try to pull you back. It will use fear, doubt, comparison, even logic itself. But every time you feel this force calling you, remember, it is not you. It is only the version that learned to survive, not to prosper. True reprogramming is done in 3 simple but powerful internal movements. First, recognize, see the shadows without fleeing. Admit the part of you that still vibrates in lack, fear of loss, or the need to defend yourself. Recognition dismantles illusion. Second, detach. Let go of the old narrative, the story you have told so long it almost became truth, the character you played but never truly represented who you are. Detach. Create space. Third, internalize. Breathe a new identity until it becomes inevitable. It is not pretending. It is acting as someone who already understands that nothing is lacking, nothing threatens, nothing competes. Occupy your body with this certainty. When you internalize abundance, your field changes even before your life changes. Transformation happens when you stop fighting the old and simply grow out of it. The new identity is not born when you affirm it. It is born when you practice it. When you repeatedly choose the version that expands, even if the old one pleads to remain. And this is the point where everything begins to reorganize. Your perspective changes. your energy changes, your decisions change, and reality inevitably follows. Because when the mind changes frequency, life has no choice but to follow. This is the simple, profound, direct path. Recognize, detach, internalize. This is how the shadow dissolves and gives way to what has always been waiting to emerge. You and your full potential. Deep down, it all comes down to a simple question, one that almost no one dares to ask themselves. What story do I tell when no one is listening? Because it is in this silent, intimate story that you reveal who you truly believe you are. Perhaps you spend your life trying to seem strong, to seem secure, to show that nothing affects you. But when the house is silent, when your head hits the pillow, you know exactly where it hurts. You know where fear still exists, where comparison still exists, where that feeling of not being far enough still exists. And this is the point where everything transforms, because the world does not change when you learn a new technique, but when you stop fleeing what has followed you for years. So I want you to pause now, breathe, and observe what happens inside you when someone around you grows, when someone achieves something you have not yet achieved, when life seems to flow for the other while you are still struggling. These answers tell more about your prosperity than any spreadsheet, any course, any external strategy. Because it is not what is missing that traps you. It is what you still refuse to look at. And when you have the courage to look, the shadow diminishes. When you recognize, the pain loses strength. And when you accept that you are ready to grow, the field responds. Life does not require perfection. Life only requires honesty with yourself. And perhaps this is the moment when you finally choose to stop hiding and start allowing yourself. At the end of everything, there is a simple and unavoidable truth. Nothing you seek is outside. What protects you, what propels you, what elevates you, all is born within. And when you realize this, when this understanding descends from the intellect into the body, something changes forever. Because in that instant, comparison loses its meaning. In that instant, the fear of losing dissolves. And in that instant, envy, whether the envy you feel or that someone projects onto you, loses all power. Life begins to flow from another place, a place where you do not compete for space. You create space. Where you do not close off, you overflow. Where you do not defend yourself, you simply exist in abundance. And when you position yourself this way, the whole world responds. Doors that seemed locked open. Opportunities that seemed distant approach. And what once threatened you becomes irrelevant. After all, you did not come here to hide. You came to expand, to occupy your place, to live a life that is not limited to what was said to be possible. The shadow only imprisons you when you run from it. When you look at it, face it, understand it, and clear it, it becomes strength. And it is this strength that now begins to arise within you. You are not someone who needs protection. You are someone who finally understands that you were never in danger. From here on, your story changes, and the world around you changes along with it. If this message touched you in any way, then allow yourself to take the next step. Take advantage while clarity is still alive within you. Don't let routine erase the impulse that was born now. Subscribe, activate notifications, and stay close, because from now on, each piece of content will be a new step in this journey of expansion. And if someone came to mind while you were watching, someone who needs to awaken to this conversation, share it. A single sentence can ignite an entire transformation. See you in the next video.